If you've been scrolling through endless lists of workstations, reading specs that look the same, and still feel a little stuck about which machine will actually let you get the work done without breaking the bank, you're not alone. I've been in that exact spot, comparing a handful of Dell, HP, and Lenovo towers, trying to figure out whether the extra horsepower on paper really translates into smoother drafts, faster renders, and fewer pauses for updates. The good news is, after spending a few afternoons testing the Dell Precision 30003660 in a real-world home office and talking to a few colleagues who already have it on their desks, I think I finally have a clear picture of who will benefit most from this rig and who might be better off looking elsewhere. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. Let's start with the core of any workstation, the processor. The 3660 ships with a 13th-gen Intel Core i5-13500, a 14-core chip that splits into 6 performance cores and 8 efficiency cores. In day-to-day terms, that means you can have a few heavy Photoshop actions, a background video encoding, and a couple of browser tabs with research papers open, all without feeling that familiar lag you get on an older laptop. I ran a typical CAD drawing, exported a 3-minute animation, and then pulled up a large Excel model all within a single session. The system never stuttered, and the transition between tasks felt almost instantaneous. For freelancers who juggle design drafts and client communications, that kind of multitasking fluidity is worth the extra core count compared to a lower-tier i3 or older i5. Memory is the next piece of the puzzle. 16 GB of DDR5 might sound like a marketing number, but in practice it gave me enough headroom to keep my Adobe suite, a couple of virtual machines for testing, and a local Git server all running at once. The moment you try to load a 4K video project into Premiere Pro while also running a background render, you'll notice how the SSD and RAM work together to keep the timeline responsive. If your workflow leans heavily into 3D rendering or large dataset analysis, you'll eventually feel the squeeze and might want to upgrade to 32 GB down the line. But for most small to medium creative studios, 16 GB hits a sweet spot between performance and price. Storage on this model is a 512 GB NVMe SSD. That's a decent amount of space for operating system files, applications, and a handful of project folders. What impressed me was the speed. Boot times were under 10 seconds, and loading a 2 GB Photoshop file took just a couple of seconds. However, if you're a video editor who regularly works with raw footage that can easily exceed a terabyte per project, you'll probably need an external RAID or a secondary internal drive. The good news is the tower includes a 500W power supply and a few extra drive bays, so adding a larger SATA SSD or even a traditional HDD for archive storage is straightforward, no need to replace the whole machine. One feature that feels almost nostalgic but surprisingly practical is the super multi-format DVD drive. In a world where most of us stream or use cloud storage, the ability to read and write Blu-ray, DVD-R, and CDR can still matter. I needed to pull data from a few legacy engineering disks for a client, and the drive handled it without any extra adapters. If you have a library of old media or you need to create physical backups for compliance reasons, this is a genuine convenience that many newer workstations have already dropped. Connectivity-wise, the workstation includes a built-in Ethernet port, which is a silent win for anyone who works from a wired office or a home setup where Wi-Fi can be spotty. I plugged the machine directly into my router and saw a consistent 1 gigabit per second link, which kept large file transfers to the cloud smooth and reliable. The USB front panel offers a mix of USB-C and USB-A ports, enough for a docking station, an external monitor, and a few peripherals. The rear panel is a bit crowded, but that's typical for a tower aimed at professional use. Now, let's talk about the actual experience of using the Dell Precision 30003660 on a daily basis. The tower sits on a modest footprint, roughly the size of a small printer, so it fits under most desks without crowding the workspace. The chassis is made of brushed aluminum on the front with a matte black side panel, giving it a professional look that doesn't scream gaming rig. It's not the flashiest design, but it blends well in an office environment. The power button is tactile, and the LED indicator shows the power state clearly, small touches that add to a feeling of quality. One practical strength that stands out is the ease of upgrade. The side panel opens with a single thumb screw, exposing the memory slots, SSD slot, and additional drive bays. If you ever find yourself hitting the 16 GB ceiling, you can add another DDR5 stick without a whole new system. The same goes for storage. A second M.2 slot is available, and there's room for a 3.5-inch HDD if you need bulk.